Welcome back everyone to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan, and on today's episode we are at the Perth 4-wheel drive and adventure show. And so you can see the Gladiator behind me. This is my booth here at the show. I've been telling stories and selling books all weekend long, but I thought what I'd do is take you for a walk around the show and show you a couple of things that have really stood out to me and that I think makes Australian 4-wheel drive shows quite a bit different than the ones I've seen in North America. So let's go and have a look around at some of the vehicles and some of the things that are at the Perth show that I think are really great. Here it is, the Perth 4-wheel drive and adventure show. So here we are guys, behind me is the massive ARB booth. I think this is the biggest booth at the whole show, and you can see there's tons of stuff for sale. This has been flat out all weekend. And something I wanted to mention that I think is incredible, the difference between this show and the ones I've seen in North America. You've heard me mention before that the laws here are really, really strict. It's really hard to run 35s on a vehicle, 37s are just flat illegal, and there's no such thing as like a 6-inch lift or kind of all of that I would say is getting into ridiculous territory, or certainly is not necessary for long-term touring or overlanding. All of that's just flat illegal in Australia, you can't have it. And so what that means is, in all of these booths and all of these companies selling gear, they don't have vehicles that are sitting on 40-inch tires. They don't have vehicles that have like a 9-inch lift and look like a monster truck, because that's not real. And I think the difference is Australians really appreciate real, and they appreciate something that they could actually buy and actually use. Australians are a lot more down to earth in that regard. So they're not kind of dreaming of the ultimate, they're actually achieving what's realistic. Because tons and tons of Australians, they do drive around Australia. It is a really common thing to do. So here in the ARB booth, it's really fun to walk along and have a look. This is a brand new Ford Ranger behind me. I think they just announced it has like the new engine, maybe the one out of the F-150 or some new diesel, I don't actually remember. But interestingly, it only has 33-inch tires because that's all that's ever going to be legal in Australia. Of course, it has like an ARB canopy thing on the back, an ARB roof rack. Because we're in the ARB booth, it's probably got ARB bumpers. But again, it's like a really down-to-earth, honest, real vehicle that people can buy and own and drive around the country. Same story behind me right now. This is a 300 series Land Cruiser. So this is the brand new cruiser that is not coming to North America. Here in Australia, everyone's getting it in a diesel, even though the wait list is like 2 years long. But again, you can see, look at that, 33-inch tires, ARB bumper, ARB roof rack, some Max Tracks or some knockoff Max Tracks up there.
Don't be alarmed when using one of these shackles.
ARB, of course, have their big kitchen in the back. But again, this is like a very honest, realistic build of what people would have if they bought a Land Cruiser. It does have a big bull bar on the front. This is, Australians consider this mandatory because you're going to hit a kangaroo. Of course, it has a CB antenna on the front because you have to have a CB when you're in Australia. So it has the things that you need. It doesn't have all the extra overt, over-the-top, 40-inch tires, supercharger kind of bling that isn't actually necessary to get it done. So that's the real thing I'm noticing about this show. Same story goes. This is, I think it's a 4-tonner, isn't it? Australia gets the thing called the 4-tonner. We don't get the 4-runner. Again, 33-inch tires, ARB Old Man Emu suspension. You know, realistic, just a decent size fridge. It's ARB's fridge, of course. It looks like about a 55 litre, some really nice integrated drawers. But again, this is a vehicle anyone could go and buy and deck out. Oh, it's actually a Prado. You can see I'm not that good at spotting Toyota vehicles, but it's a Prado, so it's like a Lexus, I guess you guys call it in America. But again, it would have a diesel in it. It probably has the 4.5 litre V8. As we go further down the line, I'm sure, what have we got here? This is an Isuzu D-Max, they call them. So this is yet another ute or pickup truck offering. Once again, 33-inch tires, nice simple rack, rooftop tent, awning. Now this is cool too, the ARB awning, it has built-in light. It has an orange LED light built in, which is actually really cool. Of course, it's showcasing that you can just use a swag to get out camping. You don't have to have a carbon fiber rooftop tent, which I think is really great. Again, let's keep it real, let's keep it down to earth. And then the final vehicle here, I forgot even to look at the front of it, so I don't know. Kind of guessing it's a Hilux, but again, I'm not that good at spotting vehicles. It's a Mazda, it's a BT50. And so these are also really common in Australia. Again, it has like a small turbo diesel, and again, it's like a ute or a pickup truck. So these vehicles that we've just walked past, this is a really, really good example of the kinds of vehicles that people use to drive around Australia. Whether you're towing a caravan or whether you're sort of doing it solo like I am, you know, with a self-contained vehicle, you know, a Hilux or a D-Max or a Land Cruiser or a Prado or a Ranger, those are the number one, you know, those are the top vehicles that people would use. And this is what they look like when people use them. You don't have 40-inch tires, you don't have beadlocks, you don't have superchargers. You have what you need and nothing else. I really like it. So Australia has a huge caravanning culture. In fact, I would say the majority of people that drive around Australia, they do it towing a caravan like this. And obviously there's about 1 million different variations on these caravans, size, weight, luxury, all of that. And they come in editions that are kind of rated for off-road. They might not be too strong, all the way up to legitimate tough off-road camper trailers. But towing in Australia is actually very, very common. And I would say the majority of people do it. So this show has, I don't even know, 10,000 caravans hanging around, all sizes, all shapes, all models. So it is a big part of this show is caravanning, which doesn't interest me in the least, but it's cool that it's here and obviously lots of people do love it. Funny to see, here's a Grand Cherokee behind me, one of only a handful of Jeeps actually at the show. So as I was driving in, I was really surprised to see one of the local Jeep dealers really does have a Gladiator here. So mine is not the only one. I thought it might have been. Pretty crazy you can go to a four-wheel drive show and not just have it be overflowing with Gladiators and Wranglers. And then there is another one too, way down in the back corner. I only glimpsed it, but it looks like it has like some bumpers on it, suspension, maybe some tires and wheels. So 3 Jeep Gladiators at Australia's biggest four-wheel drive and camping show. Kind of shows you how popular Jeep are in Australia. Not very popular. Instead, what is popular, here we go, let's just walk down the row here. So, first vehicle, 78 series Troop Carrier V8 turbo diesel. Second vehicle, 79 series single cab V8 turbo diesel. Third vehicle, I think looks like the same thing. Now we get a double cab 79 series, again with the turbo diesel. Then we get a Hilux. This thing these days has a 2.4 litre, 4-cylinder turbo diesel. Further down the line, we get a Prado, which kind of is your Lexus, I think, although it does have a diesel, no doubt, probably the 4.5 litre. Oh yeah, then we get a 4-tonner. So a 4-tonner, I don't even really know how to say it, but says it has a 2.8 litre turbo diesel, so I'm assuming it's the same engine that's in the Hilux. And you can see it's very much like a 4Runner. It is kind of like an SUV hatchback. And then down the end, of course, we get, I'm gonna guess this is a Hi-Ace, just looks like a cargo van. Pretty good if you were gonna do van life. And it looks like inside they've got their 300 series Land Cruisers, because these things are still hard to come by. So they're not like extremely common. Not everyone has them. Some dealerships are still struggling to get them. And you can see this thing has the new turbo diesel engine in it. So I believe this is a 3.3 litre twin turbo diesel. And the turbos are actually in here. They're in the V of the engine. People were a bit scared of it when it very first came out. People were a bit worried that it wasn't going to be like durable and long-term enough. And of course it's not a V8, so Aussies don't like it, but all reports so far is that it's excellent. It has way more power and it has more torque than the engine that is way bigger than it. So obviously Toyota have worked their magic and made what appears to be an excellent engine. I don't actually know what the transmission in this thing is, maybe like a 10-speed auto or an 8-speed auto. Don't even know if you can get it in a stick shift. 300 series Land Cruiser, I think they're about $120,000 or $140,000. Big money these days. So I did just say the greatest thing about this show is that everything's being kept reasonable and realistic. Of course, now this contradicts me massively, but these are actually not uncommon in Australia. There's a lot of companies that will convert your Australian ute, whatever it is, into a 6-wheel drive beast like this. I would say already this wheel is already longer than the wheelbase of my Gladiator, or similar. Then you add that, then you still add another few feet. This thing is actually a boat. That must be the longest vehicle on the road in Australia. Again, it only has like 32s or 33s on it, so they're not going outrageous. The reason people do this is because they really want to increase the payload of the vehicle and the towing capacity. They get these things rated for something insane. They can carry like 5 tons or something like that, so their payload is like 3 tons. Absolutely insane, and they can tow some obscene amount as well. And people do say they do pretty well over sand dunes and stuff like that, even though they are so long. But this is just one of those like throw money at it because you just want to bring more and more and more heavy stuff, and you start to become convinced that you need that massive payload. I don't know, I'm not really a fan. Here I am, I just found the Engel tent, and for those of you that don't know, Engel have been selling 12-volt car fridges and freezers since the dawn of time. I don't know, since maybe the 60s or the 70s, something like that. I believe these things are made in Japan, and they are considered utterly indestructible. People have these things for decades and decades. They beat the living daylights out of them, and they still work flawlessly for years and years and years. So people absolutely become Engel fanatics simply because they're so tough and so durable. For many Australians, you just would never think of using a brand other than Engel. And I believe, yeah, they have a new range or a new edition. And you can see these things get really big. But definitely Engel is one of those brands that once people have had one and they love it, they are like brand loyal for life because they are so good. Here's another one of those massive 6-wheel drive things. We saw a lot of guiding companies in The Simpsons gearing up to use these to cross because they have so many people with them. They have a vehicle like this, they just load up with gear and food and water and fuel, and it's basically the like weighs 6 tons ridiculous vehicle that goes ahead, and then all the people and all the passengers are in sort of more normal vehicles. But yeah, I mean, I guess Australians do use them for some purposes, but I still think they're kind of weird. Behind me here is the massive TJM booth, which I guess is nearly as big as ARB. And for anyone that doesn't know, TJM is an aftermarket parts brand. I guess they're kind of like your 4-wheel parts in America. They make some of their own stuff. I think it's kind of cheap, but then they also retail a bunch of things like Dometic fridges and, you know, Max Tracks and kind of brand names that we recognize. But you can see, look how popular this is. I'll walk in there. I don't know if I'll be able to talk much because it's kind of loud, but have a look how busy it is. And so these guys do everything: suspension, lights, fridges, winches, air compressors, and they're an Australia-wide brand. So often in a town, you'll see they'll have like a TJM. Not only is it a store, but you know, they'll do the upfitting for you. So they'll install all of the parts. So here we are, guys. I've been wandering around a bit more, and I just found the Jeep booth, and there's nobody here. Not only is there nobody here, but they haven't even wiped off the vehicle since the rain last night. This is what my Jeep looked like this morning, but obviously I wiped mine off and kind of cleaned it up. Anyway, and this is the only, well, no, there's one other Gladiator. So there's this one and one other. Rubicon, I'm assuming it's new. It's got the Rubicon front bumper, obviously, but Gladiator, they've got a, what do they call this thing? I don't even know in Australia what this one's called. And then obviously we've got a Wrangler, non-Rubicon, but yeah, it's kind of strange to see. Not only are there no like employees manning the booth, there are also no customers asking questions. There's no interest. It's the reality of Jeep in Australia. It just is not popular and not sought after. But on the other hand, let's have a look at this vehicle that has people crawling all over it. This is the Ineos Grenadier. So it's actually real, and they've got one. They're calling this one a pre-production test vehicle. So I asked, they wouldn't let us pop the bonnet. They wouldn't let us have a look at the engine. He said it's normally said it drives, but someone took a video or photo or something and posted it around the world, and they weren't too happy with that. So pretty impressive vehicle. I'm really happy that a company has stepped up to build this brand new, you know, meets all crash taste, safety and emissions and all that. This one is the 3-litre straight 6 BMW diesel engine. You can also get a petrol, which is also a straight 6. They were saying here in Australia that orders have been about 80% diesel, 20% petrol, which is really interesting. And some things I noticed that I think are curious or, you know, worth looking at. The tires and wheels on this thing, check it out. These are 18-inch steel wheels. So, you know, I love my steel wheels. These ones are enormous. And the tires, they're 255/70 18s. So they're not very wide. They're only 255. So these are probably like 32s. I'm gonna say maybe even 31s type of thing. So those are not big wheels and tires to come stock. Really interesting to see some of the details where the hinges are like, they're not obviously identical to Jeep's hinges, but they're pretty close. The push button doors feel really weird. This push button is like kind of feels plasticky, it feels cheap. The door itself feels nice and heavy and solid though. And then of course the interior basically looks like an aircraft. So they've gone full with all these switches and, you know, kind of all the details. And also on the overhead compartment here, have a look at some of these switches like for the diff lock and stuff. The way that they've done all of this detail and they have all these little metal handles and everything feels like a lot of more detail than is necessary. But I mean, I guess it looks really cool, which is important. I gotta say though, like some of the details are really awesome and I really like, but have a look down here. This, I'm certain, is just gonna get covered in dirt and then you're never gonna be able to get it clean again. Take this thing off-road for a week and it definitely won't look as clean as it does today. But I do have to say though, the seats, they're Recaros and they are extraordinarily comfortable. Sitting in there, you really feel like you're strapped into this thing. You are not gonna bounce out, you are not gonna bounce around, which is really nice. Up on the roof, it actually has a Rhino rack, roof rack, and it is a gutter mount, and this thing has a really massive gutter and a really strong way that it mounts, which is interesting. It's got a ladder on the back door, and of course, it has a massive, massive rear opening. The two doors, one open to the right, one open to the left. Look how cavernous this is. I could almost just walk in here standing up. This is huge back in here. I really like that. It's obviously got all these cargo tie downs. It's got this cool setup to, you know, set your gear in and make sure it's all tied down. And of course, iconically, it has the spare tire on the back because you have to have the spare tire on the back to be a cool four-wheel drive. A few accessories on the side, of course, Rhino rack shovel, max tracks. And this one really is a test vehicle. They're saying this is not actually a production road-ready vehicle, but they are coming. They'll be here in January in Australia and they'll start selling them at the end of January. And so this is just the first one. This is the station wagon. After the station wagon is probably coming the dual cab ute or the dual cab pickup truck, and then they'll see after that. They have to figure out what comes next. Pretty impressive though. They were just saying it's about 800 kilogram payload. So they were aiming for a ton, they were aiming for 1,000 kilograms, but they didn't quite get there because it turned out to be a little heavier than they hoped. Overall though, the Ineos Grenadier, even just judging by the number of people climbing all over it and crawling around it and who are excited by it, I'd say it's pretty safe to say this thing is going to be a success. Starts at $85,000 here in Australia. That is perfectly reasonable for a vehicle like this. It slots it in on the higher end, but it's much cheaper than what the Wrangler is right now. So I dare say if Jeep in Australia want to compete, the price of the Wrangler can't stay where it is. It's been going up and up and up because the US dollar is getting stronger and because of inflation and all that stuff. Right now, a Rubicon here in Australia is 100,000 Australian dollars. This thing's only $85,000. I think it's pretty clear which one people are going to choose purely based on price. So another booth here that's well worth checking out. This is Mitts Alloy. And so these guys are up in Cairns in far northern Queensland, and they make canopies or tray backs for utes. So you basically take the back of your ute or your pickup truck and throw it away, and instead you put this in its place. So you guys would have seen these. Expedition Overland currently are running these on a couple of their North American vehicles, and this is the thing to do in Australia. A massive percentage of people do this to their vehicle to then tour Australia. And here's one that you guys are going to recognize. We've got a Ram 1500. So believe it or not, these things are actually starting to make an impact. Whoa, this is a 2500. I stand corrected. These things are actually starting to make an impact here in Australia. You see them on the road more and more. This one's a Cummins turbo diesel. The 1500s are all Hemis, I believe. They're expensive. They're a huge amount of money here, but people love them because they're big and they're strong and they have huge payload and huge towing capacity, and Australians are going for that these days. And so you can see the MITS alloy canopy, it looks super, super slick, super integrated. Like, I mean, you could say that this came from factory. Pretty nice to have all this like dust proofing, all this durability going on. Lots of people do this where you mount all your electronics up in here. You know, it's out of the dust, it's out of the rain and any chance of water ingress, unless you drive through the world's deepest river. But yeah, these guys make amazing stuff. Let's see what comes next. What is that? They've got one on the back of a Hilux, more or less the same thing. They've got one on the back of a dual cab 79 series Land Cruiser. So this is, you know, borderline the ultimate of touring in Australia. A big 79 series Land Cruiser. It even has two massive CB antennas on it, because why have one when you can have two? Big Rhino rack, roof rack, LED light bar, huge big awning. One of these ones that actually goes forwards and backwards. I really like those, they're really cool. Lots of them have, yeah, it does. It has a water tank in here between the canopy and the cab. That's really nice. Gonna make a liar out of me. Yeah, this thing does actually have 35s on it. So yeah, 35s, it can be done, it can be legal. Depends on the state, depends on the vehicle, depends on if you get it engineered, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can see MITS alloy. Look at the quality of like the welds and stuff. These guys have been making these for a long time and they do an exceptional job. I would be very happy and very proud to have one of these on one of my vehicles. But the thing about it, and I think a lot of people don't think about it, you have this, you live outside. There is categorically no interior living space in that thing because it's full of your gear. It's your fridge, it's your electronics, it's all your storage, it's your food. So yeah, it's great. It has these wings that are, you know, going to cover you from the rain when you're standing where I am now. But make no mistake about it, you live outside. There is no option to live inside in this vehicle. You guys might not have seen them, so I'll just show you really quickly. I'm at the Isuzu booth, I guess. Here in Australia, these are really common. This is called an Isuzu MUX, and this is like kind of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the SUV version of this vehicle. It comes with a small turbo diesel engine, and these are renowned for getting exceptionally good fuel mileage. Friends actually tow a van around Australia in one of these things. They get 8 litres per 100 while towing the van. That is unheard of. That is twice as good as my Jeep, and it's towing a van. That is amazing. That's the SUV version of it. Nearly the same car is called the D-Max, but of course it's actually a ute or a pickup truck. And then there's another one here, another D-Max. I don't know what the difference is, but again, same small turbo diesel engine, same amazing fuel consumption. Check it out, guys. I found another Jeep. I'm on the lookout. This is an old school, I'm gonna say FSJ. It's a full-size Jeep. Cherokee, I don't know if this was factory or not, this massive tray back. Geez, this tray must be 10 feet long, 12 feet long. It is enormous. And this thing, being a full-size Jeep, I'm assuming it has 1-ton axles. I'm assuming this thing is absolutely monstrous. Yeah, it does. It does massive front axle, massive leafs in the front and in the rear. This thing, of course, it's got the right badge. This thing is a certified monster. Of course, because we're in Australia, you have to have a Land Cruiser Troopie with a rooftop conversion. This is the Alu Cab conversion, and actually, it's one of the only ones I've seen at the show. I'm kind of surprised. I thought they would be everywhere, but there haven't actually been that many of them. But these things are super slick and awesome. I mean, in terms of an incredible setup to drive around the world, you can't do much better than this. You've got obviously living space back in here, and then you can crawl upstairs and the bed pushes up out of the way. These things are cavernous inside. Even standing here at the back of it, I feel like I'm about 9 feet away from the back of the driver's seat. It's easily 2 feet longer than my Wrangler was, maybe even 3 feet. It's a beast. I was saying earlier, there's starting to be an influx of American vehicles in Australia, and you can see this one, an F350. You do not see many of these on the road in Australia. They are talking about bringing the F150 here. You can kind of buy it right now, but not through Ford. Apparently some private company buys it, turns it into right-hand drive, makes it legal, and then you buy it off them. You're not actually buying it off Ford at all. This thing, the F350, I have no idea what the story with it is. But yeah, incredible to see that larger and larger vehicles are starting to take off in Australia. I'm even just gonna have a look. This has KM3s on it. which are obscenely big, 37, 13.5 by 20. Easily the biggest tyres I've seen here at this four-wheel drive show. Easily the biggest suspension, massive leafs on the rear. So it's coming. Australia's gonna slowly, I think, get overrun by vehicles like that. Here's another cool vehicle and another cool story. You know I love vehicles that have been used. These guys have this 1975 Series 3 Land Rover. So this thing is, I mean, well, it's older than I am, which tells you a lot, but pretty rugged looking vehicle. I feel like you possibly need a visit to the chiropractor after driving this, but check it out. These guys, they drove this thing the length of the Canning Stock Route. That is the world's most remote road. Here in Australia, it's insanely famous for being the most remote, the most rugged, the most wilderness, the most out there. So they drove that. It is a 2.25 litre petrol engine, 2.25 litres, probably has about 10 horsepower, I'm gonna guess. Pretty insane adventure they had. And anyway, they filmed it, and so they have a documentary that they filmed called Road to Ruin, and I believe it's on Apple TV, and they're working on some other distribution channels. But if you've ever wanted to see what the Canning Stock Route looks like and what ridiculous adventure looks like, check that out. Road to Ruin in a 1975 Series 3 Land Rover. Just for a bit of fun, let's finish up with the little Suzuki Jimny. These things are getting really common in Australia. I've seen lots of them on the road. And this is my buddy here. He's in the booth next to me at the show. This one is awesome in lime green and decked out for adventure. And so these guys actually just took 22 of these things, is that right? They took 22 of these things across the Gun Barrel Highway here in Australia, which is one of Australia's really famous, like most remote, kind of most outback trails. They had an amazing time. Look at these things. He calls himself the Mighty Overlander, which I love. When you drive a Jimny, I think you have to kind of be a bit self-aware. But look at this thing. That is a hell of a lot of adventure in a very small package. And I love it. I think it's incredible. And of course, it's a pretty new vehicle, but it's got a small diesel. Is it a diesel? No, it's petrol engine. But 5-speed manual, exactly what you want. And they've taken these things a lot of places and not have any trouble. So you really should, I've got to find, there it is. Check him out on Instagram and YouTube, the Mighty Overlander. I'm a little bit jealous of that name. Maybe I should try and take it off him, rebrand. What do you reckon? So there we go, guys. We are now back at the Jeep and my booth, and that brings me to the end of our tour of the Perth 4-wheel drive and adventure show. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've enjoyed looking around at what overlanding and 4-wheel driving looks like in Australia, Australia's biggest show for those things. And until next time, have fun out there. Maybe I'll bump into you on the road.